Let me fill you in on this total family mess that went down at my wedding. My dad, Kenneth, or Kenny as everyone calls him, 55, has always been the kind of guy who shoots from the hip, making decisions based on whatever sounds fun in the moment without giving a second thought to the fallout. This trait pretty much tanked his marriage to my mom, Monica, 53, who kicked him to the curb a decade ago. And honestly, no one batted an eye when it happened. So about 2 years ago, my dad tied the knot with Willow, who's 26. Yeah, you heard that right, 26. For context, I'm 30, same age as my husband Charles. As you can imagine, this whole situation is awkward AF. I don't have anything against Willow personally. If anything, I feel sorry for her. She's polite and nice, but she's way out of her depth with my dad and doesn't seem to realize what she's signed up for. It's hard not to cringe when I see my dad trying so hard to act her age. He dresses like a teenager, constantly yaps about social media trends, and uses Gen Z or alpha slang, I can't even tell which, that he clearly doesn't understand. He's always bragging about how young and cool he is, but let's get real. He's a 55-year-old man trying to relive his youth through his wife. And no, Willow isn't a gold digger. My dad's broke as hell, so she must actually be into him. To give you the 411 on my dad, I should explain what he was like during my childhood. He was an okay dad. Funny, chill, the type who'd let me have junk food for dinner when mom wasn't looking. There were times I genuinely enjoyed hanging out with him, but as a husband, he was a train wreck. The marriage was like watching a slow-motion car crash, and growing up in the middle of that was no picnic. The arguments kicked off when I was around 7 or 8. At first, they were about small stuff like forgotten bills or who was supposed to pick me up from school. As I got older, I realized those fights were just the tip of the iceberg. The deeper issues had been festering for years. My dad was impulsive and totally irresponsible with money, blowing hundreds or even thousands on unnecessary crap like trendy gadgets or hobbies he'd ditch after 5 minutes. One year he bought a boat, claiming it was a great investment for family trips. We didn't live anywhere near water, so the boat just sat in our driveway for years until he sold it for pennies on the dollar because it was falling apart. Meanwhile, my mom was busting her butt to pay the bills, keep track of expenses, and stretch the grocery budget. On top of that, my dad had a gambling problem that drove my mom up the wall. He'd blow money we didn't have, thinking he could win it back, but usually ended up losing even more. There were nights he'd come home flat broke or, even worse, having borrowed money to cover his losses. My mom would lose her mind because she had to handle everything while he kept gambling. That created a ton of stress for the family and eventually became too much for her. But his gambling addiction was just one of the many ways he screwed up our lives. Money wasn't the only issue. My dad also had a wandering eye, and cheating was his constant MO throughout the marriage. He wasn't exactly subtle about it. Midnight calls that were supposedly work, flirty messages my mom would find, unnecessary business trips. When she confronted him, he'd deny everything and make her feel like she was overreacting. I think she stuck around to protect me, but it came at the cost of her own happiness. Besides money and cheating, my dad had this terrible habit of shutting down emotionally. Every time my mom tried to have a serious conversation about their problems, he'd crack jokes, change the subject, or just walk away. He avoided taking responsibility like the plague and preferred to sweep problems under the rug. My mom, desperate to save the marriage, tried everything in the book. The final straw came when my mom discovered explicit emails between my dad and some woman he met at the gym. When she confronted him, he didn't even apologize. He just shrugged and said, "What do you want me to do? I can't change who I am." That was it for her. She packed her bags, filed for divorce, and bounced. The divorce was as messy as the marriage. My dad tried to play the victim, saying my mom was cold and unsupportive, but everyone knew the truth. My mom had been holding everything together while he acted like an irresponsible teenager. Fast forward to the present. My story kicks off with my wedding, which happened last month. Charles and I had been together for 6 years and finally tied the knot after a long engagement. About 3 weeks before the ceremony, my dad called me with a special request. At first, I thought it would be something simple. Maybe he wanted a father-daughter dance or to make a toast. But nope, it was something way more bonkers. He wanted me to introduce Willow as my mother during the reception. I thought he was pulling my leg at first and laughed, but he was dead serious. He explained that this would make Willow feel welcome and respected as part of the family, and that it was the least I could do to show support for their marriage. I corrected him, saying the least I could do was literally nothing, but he couldn't care less. He kept going on about how important it was for Willow to feel accepted, especially because she was so much younger than me. As if that wasn't enough, he added, "It'll be good optics for you too," which made 0 sense. He said it like I should be grateful for this opportunity. I was speechless, not because it was a reasonable request, but because it was completely off the wall. He was asking me to pretend Willow was my mom, to put on some kind of show for the guests at my own wedding. I couldn't wrap my head around why he thought I'd go along with this. He wasn't asking for a kind gesture or a small favor. He was asking for full-on insanity just to boost his own image. It was a total slap in the face to both me and my mom. The audacity was mind-blowing, and I felt secondhand embarrassment for Willow. After all, she's an adult who could easily blend into the family without me having to act like she's my surrogate mother. I explained all this calmly at first, but he didn't take it well. He accused me of being jealous of Willow, which is ridiculous, and said I was being petty and should put my feelings aside for his sake. I told him straight up that I wouldn't do it and warned him that if he tried to force this at my wedding, it would blow up in his face, and not because of me. I know my dad, and I know how the rest of the family feels about his marriage to Willow. They're polite to her face, but behind closed doors, they think it's weird and kind of pathetic. So the big day rolled around, and initially, everything seemed picture perfect. My mom looked stunning, Charles was over the moon, and I was feeling on top of the world. But then, my dad decided to go completely off script during his speech. He tossed aside everything we'd planned and launched into this bizarre monologue about Willow, calling her the most wonderful mother figure in my life, and even cracking jokes about how I was lucky to have 2 moms now. I swear, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. My mom froze in complete shock. Charles shot me this nervous side-eye, and my bridesmaids were exchanging these WTF glances. The secondhand embarrassment was so intense I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. But the real dumpster fire started later that night when my dad, in his totally misguided enthusiasm, began introducing Willow to my friends and family as my daughter's new mom. Talk about a crash and burn situation. One of my childhood friends, who's known me since kindergarten, laughed out loud when he said it, thinking it was some kind of joke. When she realized he was dead serious, she just stared at him like he'd grown a second head before walking away. My aunt, my mom's sister, didn't even try to hide her disgust. She muttered, "Is this guy for real?" before turning her back on him. It was mortifying, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a tiny bit vindicated seeing my guests share my discomfort. By the end of the night, I overheard several guests whispering about how absurd the whole thing was. Someone called Willow, "Your dad's midlife crisis in a dress," while another joked she should have been the flower girl instead of my new mom. It was brutal, but honestly, everyone could see through the charade and nobody was buying what my dad was selling. Poor Willow looked uncomfortable the entire time. Every time my dad introduced her as my new mother, I could see her forcing a smile, but her face was tight with tension. She kept shooting him these quick glances, like she was trying to telepathically tell him to knock it off, but he either didn't notice or just didn't care. At one point, I overheard him say something like, "I'm doing this for you, just play along," to which she quietly begged him to stop and let her handle it. He shut her down with a, "Just be quiet and let me handle this." She fidgeted in her seat, smiled politely, but it was crystal clear she was dying inside. Watching her, I felt sorry for her. She didn't ask for any of this and didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of my dad's delusions. She was clearly just trying to be respectful, but this wasn't sitting right with her either. I wish my dad would have stopped making things harder for her. The whole situation was like watching a car crash in slow motion with my dad as the distracted driver. I wasn't surprised when my dad cornered me during the reception, absolutely livid. He accused me of turning everyone against him and Willow, saying I'd sabotaged him by not prepping people for this narrative beforehand. I reminded him that I'd explicitly warned him not to pull this stunt because it would crash and burn. I told him that if he wanted to make a good impression, he should have just introduced Willow as his wife and left it at that. But no, he refused to accept any responsibility for the disaster he'd created. According to him, I was selfish for not defending them. Now, weeks later, my dad is still fuming. He's pissed because people are gossiping about him, and the jokes have spread throughout his social circle. Apparently, someone at his golf club called him Father Time and asked if Willow was his babysitter. He claims I've humiliated him and Willow, and that I owe them both an apology. But honestly, I don't feel bad for him at all. I can't help but shake my head at his cluelessness. I warned him. I told him exactly how this would end if he tried to force this ridiculous new mom narrative. He ignored me, and now he's dealing with the fallout. I do feel a bit sorry for Willow to some extent, because I don't think she fully understands what she's gotten herself into. But as for my dad, he made his bed. Now he can lie in it. I've spent years trying to be patient with him, but at this point, I'm done. If he wants to play the victim, that's his problem, not mine. So, am I the bad guy for refusing to introduce my dad's 26-year-old wife as my mother at my wedding, and not feeling bad now that his plan blew up in his face? But wait, there's more. My dad suddenly texted me asking for a favor. Get this. He wanted me to post an Instagram story saying people should stop picking on him because he hadn't done anything wrong and didn't deserve all the negativity. Since he's always been kind of a jokester, I thought he was kidding. But nope, dead serious again. He claimed people were talking behind his back and making fun of him, and that it would really help if I posted a story setting the record straight. I told him point blank that was ridiculous. I explained that people weren't just making fun of him because of the age gap with Willow, but because he'd been acting completely out of line, saying stupid stuff at my wedding just to achieve something that wasn't necessary, especially since I already have a mom. I flat out refused to post anything defending him because I don't agree with what he did at the wedding, and I wasn't going to let it slide. It was disrespectful to my mom, to me, and even to Willow. He needed to stop playing the victim and take responsibility for his actions. Then my dad tried to emotionally manipulate me into posting the story. He went on and on about how he'd supported me when I was a kid and how he was always the better parent because he gave me whatever I wanted. Honestly, that made my blood boil. Looking back, he didn't do anything extraordinary. In fact, giving me junk food that I shouldn't have had doesn't make him Father of the Year. Sure, he worked to support us, but he was also responsible for most of the problems and trauma we experienced as a family. It was my mom who had to clean up his messes, manage the finances, and make sure things functioned while he did whatever he wanted, blowing money on unnecessary crap or cheating on her. Not to throw shade at Willow, but my mom is my real mom, and she's been more of a father to me than he ever was. Yeah, he earned money, but we never saw much of it because he blew it all on himself. I guess he thought playing the "I'm your dad, you owe me" card would work, but it just came across as manipulative and made me even angrier. The reality is, he hasn't done anything that deserves a special favor, especially now that he's acting so disconnected from reality. Or maybe reality disconnected from him. I get that he might be feeling insecure or trying to adapt to his new life, but that doesn't mean he gets a free pass for making the whole Willow situation so awkward and inappropriate. His attempt to emotionally manipulate me only made things worse, and it's hard to take him seriously when he's acting like some cool influencer with his 108 followers, pretending he's still in his 20s. I repeated that I wouldn't do it. The fact that he keeps pushing this idea that Willow could be my mother is absurd, especially when my actual mother was right there at the wedding, enjoying her plate of shrimp. Willow and I are practically the same age, and she's not my mother. It's not even temporarily possible, period. That's when my dad completely lost it. He started yelling, saying I was living in my own world and didn't understand how hard it was for him to be married to someone so much younger. Like that was somehow my fault? I didn't tell him to marry someone younger than his own daughter. He even accused me of going behind people's backs at the wedding, telling them to talk trash about him. As if I needed to waste my time doing that when people weren't blind and could do the math themselves. We weren't getting anywhere, so I asked him why exactly he wanted me to post something on Instagram. He finally admitted it was because he's now an influencer, and his reputation is super important. At that point, I could barely contain my frustration. He has 108 followers on Instagram. That's it. 108. Actually, make that 106. My husband and I unfollowed him. He has nothing to protect because the people following him aren't looking for his recommendations or seeing him as an influencer. At most, they're getting a few laughs seeing how he acts, but he's not even good at that. Or he'd have way more followers by now. It didn't end there. Since I hung up, he's been calling and texting nonstop, demanding that I fix his problem immediately. I haven't blocked him, but I've muted him because I don't need that constant stress. Every few hours, I get another message telling me how wrong I am, how I'm hurting him, and how he's just trying to do right by Willow. This is far from doing right by Willow. Willow is one of the people he's hurting with his behavior. She's just his excuse. This is about him, as it always has been. The more I think about it, the more I realize my dad lives in this fantasy world where he thinks he's some kind of cool influencer. It's embarrassing, but also concerning. I don't know if he's starting to develop early signs of dementia or if he's just an entitled person in his purest form. It's been a while since my last update, and buckle up because this one's a doozy. For starters, Willow is pregnant with twins. Yep, twins. So I'm about to have siblings at nearly 31 years old. Fantastic. It's weird to think that my dad, the same guy who caused so much chaos in our family, is going to have kids with someone younger than me. I'm trying to be happy for Willow, but she's walking straight into the lion's den. The only thing that makes me feel slightly better for her is that she must know what she's getting into, and just doesn't care. My dad, predictably, has slipped right back into his old habits, and it's beyond frustrating. He's gambling again, just like before. It's like this endless cycle that he can't break free from. He's blowing money he definitely can't afford to lose. Literally the worst possible timing for him and Willow when they're about to need cash for twins. But it gets worse, and explains why I'm actually feeling better about Willow's situation. Willow caught him cheating 3 times. Yeah, 3. And the kicker? She keeps forgiving him. I don't know why she's putting up with this. Maybe she's hoping things will change, or perhaps she feels trapped. Honestly, I don't get it, but there she is, trying to make it work despite everything he's doing. The most shocking part was when Willow texted my mom. I can't even imagine how desperate she must have been to reach out to her husband's ex-wife for advice on how to deal with him. Of course, my mom kept it real with her. She told Willow she couldn't help because she left the relationship with my dad for the exact same reasons Willow is struggling now. My mom told her not to make the same mistakes she did and not to stick around waiting for things to get better because they never did. She ended the message with a clear, "For God's sake, run." I know how hard it was for my mom to finally walk away, so she's right. Willow shouldn't have to put up with this crap. She deserves better than a man who constantly breaks her trust, ignores her feelings, and always has an excuse to justify his behavior. I feel terrible for Willow, but ultimately, only she can escape this situation. She's going through so much right now, and she clearly doesn't deserve any of it. Being pregnant with twins should be a happy time, but instead, she's stuck with a man who seems completely indifferent to her and her feelings. I know she's holding on to hope that everything will improve, but we all know that's unlikely. My dad hasn't changed one bit, and I seriously doubt he ever will. He only thinks about himself, and the sooner Willow realizes that, the better off she'll be. Willow genuinely believes she can change him, or that this time will be different. But we're already at 3 known infidelities, plus all the ones he had with my mom. We're way past 3rd times the charm territory. I feel really torn about this whole situation. On one hand, I want to help Willow. I want to step in and tell her to leave him. But on the other hand, I know that's a decision she has to make for herself. Getting involved where I'm not invited isn't the smartest move right now, so even though I'm conflicted, I don't think I'll do anything. My mom already gave her the best advice possible, and if Willow doesn't act on that, nothing will get through to her. For now, all I can do is listen and be there when she needs me. I can't fix this mess, but I can support her. It's hard watching her go through all of this. I just hope she finds the strength to do what's best for her and the babies, even if that means walking away from my dad for good. Update. Willow is now 20 weeks pregnant, but since it's twins, she looks much further along. At least she hasn't gained too much weight, but her belly has grown enormously. I'm hoping twins aren't in the cards for me when I get pregnant. It doesn't look easy at all. But here's the real tea. My dad managed to cheat on her again, and this time she's had enough. She's finally decided to file for divorce, which is what everyone, including my dad's Instagram followers, has been waiting for. When my dad posted something about going through a divorce, someone commented, "About time." Not exactly the best timing to go through this while expecting twins, but any time to get away from my father is better than none. I'm glad she's finally putting herself and her children first. True to form, my dad couldn't handle the situation with any grace. Instead, He started harassing me nonstop. He called me over 20 times in one day. I ignored all his calls, thinking he'd eventually give up, but of course, that wasn't the case. When I wouldn't answer, he escalated, calling my office and disrupting my work, then calling my husband. Things were getting completely out of control. I realized ignoring him wasn't going to make him stop, so I finally called him back, partly to ask what the hell he wanted, and partly to make it clear I was cutting ties with him for good. I wanted to make the most of this call. I wasn't sure why he kept dragging me into his self-created problems, but my so-called father always has a way. The call was supposed to be quick, say what I needed to say, and that would be it. But he launched into one of his speeches, trying to blame me for his ruined marriage, claiming it all fell apart because I wouldn't let Willow take my mom's place in my life. My father apparently believed that if I had done that, maybe Willow would have overlooked his indiscretions. He didn't call them affairs, of course. He thought she might have been more tolerant if I had played along with his fantasy. That changed everything I'd planned to say, and not in his favor. I told him I was proud of Willow for leaving him and that if he wanted to fight her in court, I'd gladly take her side. I also reminded him that everyone knows how he behaves, so nobody would be on his side. That shut him up real quick. Before hanging up, I made it crystal clear that I want nothing more to do with him. I warned him that if he kept bothering me, my husband, or anyone close to me, I'd file a restraining order. Then I hung up, but of course my dad wasn't done with the drama. Later that same day, a childhood friend sent me a video he'd posted online. In it, he was rambling about how me, my mom, and Willow had ruined his life. Then he accused Willow of being abusive and claimed she got pregnant to trap him. All lies, but he seemed to believe people would buy it. What he didn't realize was that most of his followers were family members or lifelong friends who know exactly what he's like and how he tends to bend reality. The comments on his video were brutal. By the end of the day, he'd lost almost all his followers. The few still following him are probably people who haven't checked their accounts in ages. His meteoric rise to stardom with 108 followers crashed and burned in the blink of an eye, but nobody cares about that except my dad. What matters is what's happening in real life. Most of the family has cut him off. Even his friends want nothing to do with him. He has nobody left, and with the twins about to be born, he's going to have to figure out how to pay child support, and gambling isn't going to cut it. If he doesn't pay up, he'll face legal trouble. Meanwhile, Willow reached out to me. She asked if I'd be willing to stay in touch, especially since her kids will be my half-siblings. I told her I'd be happy to. I want to be part of her life and the twins' lives. I know it's weird to hear about a stepmom that an OP actually gets along with, but here we are. I assured her she doesn't have to face this alone. Raising twins as a single mom is no walk in the park, and I want her to know I'll be there for her however I can, whether that's helping with the babies, lending an ear, or just being a supportive figure for her children. We might not have started off on the best foot, but I respect her for making the tough decision to leave my dad and prioritize her well-being and that of her children. So that's where things stand now. My dad is out of the picture, and Willow is preparing for the twins' arrival. I'm looking forward to meeting my new half-siblings and being there for them as they grow up. This update is one that many of you have been asking for, a full recap of everything that's gone down lately with my dad, Willow, and the twins. Grab your popcorn, folks, because this saga keeps delivering. Willow has officially given birth to her twins. They arrived as healthy as could be expected, despite my father's best efforts to stress her out during the entire pregnancy. My mom and I went to the hospital together to support her and welcome the little ones. My father was notably absent from the delivery room, and not by choice. After months of harassing Willow, she finally got a restraining order against him, which prevented him from being present for the birth. You'd think he'd have taken the hint by now, but nope. When he couldn't reach Willow, guess who he contacted next? Yours truly. This time he reached out begging me to talk to Willow on his behalf since he was blocked. Finding a way to communicate with me must have been quite the challenge for him. Seeing that I now have a close relationship with Willow, he called to ask for my help, and in the same breath, had the audacity to blame me for not having built this relationship with her sooner, claiming that if I had, none of this mess would have happened. Obviously, I wasn't having any of that. I got my own restraining order against him, and because my father is nothing if not persistent, he also tried something with my mom. She got hers too, quipping, "I see they're having a sale on these. so I got one for myself. If he had tried to enter the hospital, they would have buried him under the judicial system with 3 separate restraining orders activated simultaneously. Talk about checkmate. The divorce was finalized a few months before Willow gave birth, and the judge granted her alimony until the babies were born. My father demanded a paternity test, the ultimate irony coming from a serial cheater, and Willow agreed. Now he's paying child support for 2 kids, and yes, he's actually doing it, because the judge made it crystal clear that if he thought about using that money for gambling and couldn't control his addiction, they had a nice cozy cell ready to help him kick the habit. That threat worked like a charm. As for his influencer life, my father has a new account under a different name. He's now using an artistic pseudonym instead of his real name. He's sitting pretty at 10 followers, one of which is his old account. Maybe he'll make it to 15 if he doesn't self-destruct first. I've spent a lot of time with Willow since the babies were born. It's weird. I never expected to have half-siblings at this stage in my life, let alone feel so protective of them. They're honestly adorable, and despite the circumstances of their birth, I'm determined to be the stable adult figure they deserve. Willow has been amazing through all of this. She's handled the transition to single motherhood with twins better than I ever could have imagined. There are days when she's exhausted and overwhelmed, but she never takes it out on the babies. Her strength is impressive, especially considering what she's been through with my father. We've developed a routine where I visit a couple of times a week to give her a break. Charles has even gotten on board, and he's surprisingly good with babies for someone who was initially nervous around them. My mom also stops by occasionally, which might sound strange to some people, but there's no awkwardness between her and Willow. If anything, they've bonded over their shared experiences with my dad. The first time my mom held one of the twins, I saw something change in her expression. It wasn't jealousy or resentment. It was almost like relief. Later, she told me that seeing Willow start fresh made her feel like her own decision to leave had been validated. "I just wish I'd done it sooner," she said. Willow's family has also stepped up, which is a relief. Her parents were understandably concerned about her relationship with my dad from the beginning, and while they never said "I told you so," they've been incredibly supportive since the split. Her younger sister practically lives at her place now, helping with night feedings and diaper changes. The twins' arrival has had an unexpected effect on our extended family, too. Cousins who had distanced themselves from my dad years ago have reconnected with me, curious about the babies and eager to welcome them into the family fold. It's like the twins have become this unifying force, bringing together people who had drifted apart because of my father's behavior. Not that he's noticed any of this, of course. From what I've heard through the grapevine, because I'm certainly not in direct contact, my father has been telling anyone who'll listen that we've all conspired against him. He's apparently convinced that Willow, my mom, and I planned this whole thing to ruin his reputation. The level of delusion is almost impressive. One of his former golf buddies, who still occasionally sees him at the club, mentioned that my dad has started claiming the twins aren't even his, despite the paternity test confirming they are. When asked why he's still paying child support then, he apparently mutters something about the corrupt legal system being against him. The restraining orders are working well, though there have been a few close calls. Last month, Willow spotted him driving slowly past her house, but when she called the police, he was gone by the time they arrived. She's installed security cameras now just to be safe. It's sad that she has to take these precautions, but given my father's inability to respect boundaries, it's necessary. My own restraining order came in handy when he showed up at my workplace, claiming he needed to talk to me about family business. Security escorted him out, and when the police were called, they reminded him that violating the order would result in arrest. He hasn't tried it again since. Last week, I found out that my father's been telling people he's writing a book about his experiences as a victim of modern cancel culture. Apparently, being held accountable for your actions now qualifies as being canceled. I had to laugh. His longest written work to date is probably a grocery list, and even that would have spelling errors. The idea that he could sustain the focus needed to write a book is almost as absurd as his claim that Willow trapped him with pregnancy. Meanwhile, life goes on for the rest of us. Charles and I are talking about starting our own family soon, partly inspired by seeing how rewarding, if exhausting, it can be with Willow's twins. My mom has started dating again for the first time in years. She's seeing a kind, retired professor who collects vintage records and makes her laugh. She seems happier than I've seen her in decades. Willow has been talking about going back to school once the twins are a bit older. She had put her education on hold when she met my dad, and now she's eager to finish her nursing degree. I've offered to help with childcare when that time comes, and she's already looking into programs that offer flexible schedules for parents. The twins are growing so fast. They're starting to develop little personalities already. One is always smiling, while the other has this serious, thoughtful expression that reminds me of my grandmother. It's fascinating to see these glimpses of family resemblance, these connections that exist despite everything that's happened. In a way, this whole messy situation has taught me something important about family. It's not just about blood or marriage, it's about who shows up, who stays consistent, who puts in the work of loving each other through difficult times. My father may have failed at that in every possible way, but his failure has led to new connections and stronger bonds among the rest of us. The other day, Willow asked me if I thought the twins should have a relationship with my father when they're older. It's a complicated question, and I didn't have a simple answer. Part of me thinks every child deserves to know where they come from, but another part worries about the potential for disappointment and hurt. We don't have to decide right now, I told her. We'll see who he is when that time comes. That's the thing about my father. He's always had the capacity to change, to make different choices. He's just never been willing to do the work. Maybe someday he will. Maybe having these children in the world will finally motivate him to become someone worthy of knowing them. I'm not holding my breath, but I haven't completely closed the door either. For now, I'm focused on being the best sister I can be to these tiny humans who didn't ask for any of this drama. They deserve to be surrounded by love and stability, to grow up knowing they're valued for exactly who they are, not for what they can do for someone else's ego or image. In a weird way, I have to thank my father. His absurd request at my wedding set off a chain of events that ultimately led to Willow and the twins becoming part of my life, not as a new mom and siblings in the way he wanted, but as authentic family connections built on mutual respect and genuine care. So that's where we stand, restraining orders in place, babies thriving, new beginnings all around, and my father's influencer career still hovering at a solid 10 followers. Not the happy family picture he tried to force at my wedding, but maybe something better, something real. It's been almost exactly a year since my last update, and what a year it's been. The twins just celebrated their first birthday, and watching them grow from tiny newborns into little personalities with attitudes has been incredible. They're walking now, more like stumbling around like tiny drunk people, but it counts. One's already stringing words together, while the other seems focused on climbing everything in sight. Willow has flourished as a single mom. Those first few months were rough. There were nights she'd call me at 3 a.m., crying from exhaustion, wondering if she'd made a mistake trying to do this alone. But she pushed through, and now she's got this twin wrangling thing down to a science. She even started her nursing program part-time. Charles and I take the twins one weekend a month so she can study or remember what sleep feels like. My relationship with Willow evolved into something unexpected. She's become one of my closest friends. We have this strange bond that's hard to explain. She's technically my ex-stepmother, but also the mother of my half-siblings and somehow my friend all at once. Labels don't matter anymore. We're family, plain and simple. As for my dad, that's a whole other story with some wild turns. About 6 months ago, my father violated all 3 restraining orders in one spectacularly stupid move. He showed up at my mom's house, strike 1, while I was visiting with Willow and the twins, strikes 2 and 3. His brilliant plan? He wanted to meet his children and thought ambushing us was the way to go. Logic was never his strong suit. We called the police immediately, and the judicial system doesn't look kindly on someone ignoring 3 separate restraining orders simultaneously. He spent 2 weeks in jail before posting bail, and the judge was not amused. The court ordered him to undergo a psychological evaluation, which became the unexpected turning point in this whole mess. Here's the twist nobody saw coming. My father was diagnosed with early-onset frontotemporal dementia. The condition affects judgment, impulse control, and social behavior, which explains some, though certainly not all, of his increasingly erratic behavior. Finding this out hit me in ways I wasn't prepared for. There's a certain vindication in knowing there was a medical reason behind some of his absurd actions, but it also opened up complicated emotions I'm still processing. Anger that he didn't get help sooner. Guilt for assuming he was just being self-centered. sadness for what this means for his future. The diagnosis doesn't erase the damage he's done or excuse his behavior. The person my father became didn't just appear overnight. He was always selfish and impulsive. The disease just amplified traits that were already there. But it does change how I view his future, and it's forced me to reconsider some boundaries. After a lot of discussion with my therapist, I agreed to limited, supervised visits with my father and the twins. These happen at a neutral location, with both me and Willow's brother present. The first visit was awkward, but seeing my father with the twins was illuminating. He was gentler than expected, almost timid around them. He didn't remember their names or exactly who they were to him, but he smiled when they grabbed his fingers.